Captain Adrian Vale stared at the reassignment orders like they were some bureaucratic alien artifact designed to test human patience. Effective immediately, it read, as if he hadn't been ready for years, ready to trade the humming gray corridors of Outpost 17 for the dizzying towers of the Capitol. He exhaled and imagined the grandiose welcome he'd receive. A parade of zero-gravity floats, ambassadors bobbing politely, and a fleet of ships flashing salutations. Instead, a single red stamp in the corner of the document spelled his reality. Proceed to Capitol Station Vale 9. Report to Council Operations. Avoid interference. Avoid her. Avoid her, he murmured, brow furrowed. He read it again. Avoid her. Who the hell was her? A predator? A virus? Someone with a fondness for shooting Terran officers out of airlocks. His stomach did a nervous pirouette. Somewhere in the background, the janitor, an old man with more cybernetic implants than a shuttle, muttered something that sounded like, "She'll choose you anyway." Adrian blinked. The janitor's eyes twinkled behind half-cracked goggles. He had not helped. By the time Adrian's ship docked in the Capitol's upper atmosphere, he had memorized the warning. It clung to him like a stubborn space lice infestation. Stay away from her, everyone had said. The logistics officer had said it with a sympathetic grimace. The attaché had said it as if it were holy scripture. Even the food replicator somehow beeped in caution. Adrian decided that perhaps her had powers beyond political influence. Maybe she could manipulate gravitic fields with sheer force of will or rearrange menus to unnerve officers. He moved through the docking bay with practiced caution, noting the hum of gravitic anchors, the light threads of transport lanes, and the occasional accidental collision of two impatient hover carriers. He kept his shoulders rigid, reminding himself that he had one rule: stay invisible, stay procedural, do not engage, do not provoke, avoid her, avoid whatever she was. The council chamber awaited. He entered, noting the curvature of the table, the luminescent data streams hovering above each seat, and the faint scent of ozone. Everyone else seemed prepared, arranged like pieces on a chessboard. Adrian chose the farthest seat. It was strategic, it was safe. It was, he hoped, inconspicuous. Then the doors slid open. She entered, Princess Sarilith Valer, almost human, tall, poised, her dark eyes steady as the chamber itself. The ears caught the ambient hum of the room and tilted ever so slightly, alert, elegant, aware. Adrian did not move. He could not. He felt the eyes of the council follow her. Not him, not yet. He dared not breathe too loudly. And then she walked directly to him, not ceremoniously, not with fanfare. She simply walked and took the seat beside him. Adrian's chest caught somewhere between a sigh and a minor heart attack. He had no strategy for this. None. He considered muttering something about spatial etiquette, but she preempted him. "Captain Vale," she said, voice clear, just shy of teasing, "what is your opinion on the proposed orbital stabilization array?" Adrian blinked. He was a military officer, trained to evaluate supply lines, fleet readiness, tactical arrays, and unexpected intrusions of alien politics. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He settled on the safest response. "It will maintain the orbit, Princess, assuming the gravitic regulators are calibrated to local standards." She tilted her head, ears brushing the data streams above. "And if they are not?" "The satellites may enter a slow decay or, produce a pleasing visual show for any low-orbit observers." He felt the corners of his mouth twitch. Humor was his shield. It was shaky but deployed. She laughed. Not a musical laugh, not a flirtatious one, just a laugh that acknowledged the absurdity of warning labels and orbital decay. The council shifted uncomfortably. Somewhere, an ambassador swallowed ceremonial nectar the wrong way. Adrian maintained a neutral expression, silently proud. He had not flinched. He had not violated protocol. She had simply chosen to sit beside him. Session ended. Adrian left with measured steps, telling himself he had survived the first trial. He would be prudent. He would maintain distance. He would. The next morning, he found her at the breakfast chamber. She had taken the seat diagonally opposite him at first, a polite acknowledgement of his invisible line, before sliding closer with a wink that seemed entirely accidental. "I hope the replicator coffee meets Terran standards," she said. "Or is it too stimulating?" Adrian snorted, a rare sound for a captain. "It's alarming but edible, like most things in diplomacy." Her ears flicked, a subtle nod, as if she appreciated the joke. And just like that, he realized the universe had delivered a new anomaly. She closed the distance, laughed at his defensive humor, and left him to follow protocol like a dutiful automaton. By the end of the week, he had counted precisely 7 moments where she had sidestepped custom, expectation, and perhaps gravity itself, simply to appear at his side. Each time, his attempt at professional composure collided with the odd thrill of being observed deliberately. The warnings had warned him well, yet they missed the essential truth. She was untouchable, not because he avoided her, but because she chose to be near him. And Captain Adrian Vale, for all his disciplined training and careful calculations, realized that some variables, especially ones with long, expressive ears and a talent for laughter, were simply not meant to be avoided. The first chapter closed with him seated in the observation deck, staring at the capital's suspended towers, and thinking that perhaps in a galaxy full of regulations, gravity fields, and carefully calculated alliances, the most dangerous act was a princess who refused to let him remain distant. The morning announcements came over the intercom like a serenade of bureaucracy. "Attention, all personnel. Captain Adrian Vale is reminded that proximity to Princess Sarilith Vaylor must remain within established parameters. Failure to comply will result in administrative adjustments." Adrian chuckled softly, the sound bouncing off the metallic walls of his quarters. Administrative adjustments. Surely that did not include having to wear one of those glittering ceremonial harnesses that restricted arm movement. If it did, he would immediately file a complaint, preferably with someone who had at least one functional eye on the universe instead of the floor. Breakfast in the central chamber felt like a new kind of drill. Adrian chose the safest corner, calculating the trajectory from the replicator to his table, and from the table to the exit. He had accounted for all variables: tray stability, gravitic fluctuation, and accidental elbow contact. Then she appeared, like a comet with impeccable timing, and placed herself 1 seat away. Not next to him, yet close enough that the council spies were visibly recalibrating their expectations. "Terran coffee again?" she asked, ears flicking with subtle amusement. "Or have you upgraded to synth tea?" "Still coffee," Adrian replied. "Bureaucratically approved, minimally life-threatening." He raised the cup. She returned the gesture with a faint tilt of her head that suggested she appreciated the joke more than she should. Council sessions became a series of improbable events. Adrian, armed with data slates, charts, and an internal monologue warning him about every misstep, tried to stay as far from her orbit as protocol demanded. She did not comply. She laughed at projections he submitted, asked questions that exposed minor inconsistencies in supply algorithms, and somehow kept her ears angled toward him at every critical juncture. A mid-session anomaly occurred when a holographic fleet projection glitched, displaying vessels upside down and in reverse orbit. Adrian pointed cautiously at the error. "It appears the navigational matrices have decided to take a vacation," he murmured. Princess Sarilith smirked, ears twitching. "Perhaps they are rehearsing for a Terran circus act." The council erupted in polite coughing, while Adrian nearly fell from his chair, suppressing a laugh. He noted the irony. The most politically untouchable princess had just made him feel like the most human being in the room. After the session, hallway chatter focused entirely on the absurdity of proximity. Whispered warnings mingled with speculation. "She's testing him," said one aide. "He's testing her patience," said another. Adrian shrugged when he overheard. In truth, he was neither testing nor being tested. He was simply attempting to walk without tripping over centuries of ceremonial protocol. A minor crisis erupted when the external docking sensors detected an unscheduled freighter attempting to dock in the capital's outer ring. Adrian was summoned for advisory input. Princess Sarilith arrived simultaneously, effortlessly slipping past security detail without triggering alarms. "Captain," she said, tone playful, "do you think the freighter carries a diplomatic gift or a weapon disguised as a gift?" Adrian squinted at the monitors, calculating trajectories, gravitic anomalies, and fuel efficiency. Either way, the gift-wrapped weapons will be extremely difficult to ensure. He offered a faint smile, noting that her ears twitched in appreciation. She laughed softly, turning toward the council liaison as if to say, "Do you see? He understands the absurdity of your systems." Later, they walked together through the observation corridor, silently avoiding orbiting transport lanes. Adrian kept a careful pace. She matched him without effort, long ears swaying with precise rhythm. "Do Terrans always maintain such formal distances?" she asked. "Only when facing alien royalty, gravitational anomalies, or untested coffee blends," he replied. She laughed, a sound that made the gravity regulators in the corridor feel like they had been tuned to a slightly more human wavelength. Private strategy discussions were a different battlefield. The council insisted on protocol, but she bypassed it effortlessly, inviting Adrian into small advisory sessions and listening to his assessments with genuine attention. He proposed the most logical solutions. She framed them as elegant maneuvers for interstellar optics. Their humor threaded through technical jargon, like low-frequency signals hidden in gravitic fields. At one point, when he suggested a resource allocation adjustment, she replied, "Your logic is sound, Captain, but perhaps a more dramatic approach would terrify fewer administrators and please more engineers." Adrian quirked an eyebrow. "Dramatic efficiency." She nodded. "Precisely. The universe appreciates efficiency, but it admires flair." By the third day, the court began to murmur openly. Advisors attempted subtle interventions. A folded note here, a cough strategically timed there. Each attempt was met with Sarilith's serene composure. She accepted their advice politely, implemented it selectively, and continued to seek Adrian's input first. The subtle defiance was not reckless, nor disrespectful. It was deliberate, measured, and effective. Humor remained their shield against the weight of endless expectation. When a junior clerk suggested implementing a protocol scanner that would alert if anyone came within 3 meters of the princess, Adrian muttered, "I hope it includes a snooze function." Sarilith chuckled. "We could calibrate it to chirp whenever someone speaks nonsense," she suggested. Adrian laughed openly this time, ignoring the horrified looks of the surrounding council. By the end of the week, it had become a pattern. The council whispered, the security monitors blinked. Adrian blinked. "Harmony?" he asked, leaning back slightly, trying to process whether he had missed a secret code for "you're about to be vaporized." The aide nodded, sweat gleaming like a starship's window in sunlight. "Yes, sir, Harmony." Princess Sarilith stepped forward, ears flicking like twin signals of polite curiosity. "Excuse me," she said, calm and deliberate. "Has Captain Vale breached protocol?" The room froze. Even the gravitic stabilization hum seemed to pause. "No, Your Highness," stammered one of the senior advisors, a man who had survived 3 administrations and 2 near-catastrophic interstellar negotiations. "He has complied fully with all regulations." "Has he sought influence beyond his station?" She continued, voice smooth as ionized silk. Again, silence. "Then," she said finally, voice soft yet carrying the weight of a nova, "you object not to his actions but to mine." The advisors exchanged glances, like particles unsure whether to collide or orbit. Adrian's stomach performed a minor zero-gravity flip. He opened his mouth to say something, anything, but closed it again. Humor would have been helpful, but this was clearly beyond the capacity of standard comedic timing. Sarilith's eyes, dark and precise, scanned the room with the calm patience of one who had measured centuries in hours. "Proximity was my choice," she stated simply. "I find Captain Vale's perspective strategically useful. He is disciplined, predictable, and remarkably adept at not overstepping boundaries." A clerk whispered something about recalibrating the universe, and Adrian snorted quietly, earning a raised eyebrow from the princess that conveyed subtle approval. Later, the council attempted another strategy: oblique warnings in ceremonial spaces. Adrian would find a note in his data slate: "Remember your position. Maintain decorum." He would glance up. Sarilith would be adjusting the gravitic field of the room ever so slightly, just enough that the note would float inches from the edge of the table like an obedient drone. He would retrieve it with perfect etiquette and respond internally: "Decorum achieved." Universe amused. During one particularly tense negotiation about border patrol assignments, Adrian proposed a solution that was mathematically sound but politically dull. Sarilith interjected with a flourish that left counselors blinking. "An elegant approach," she said, "that signals competence without threatening anyone's ego or our satellite's delicate gravitational alignment." The room was simultaneously impressed and horrified. Adrian nearly choked on replicated tea. "I thank you, Princess," he managed, noting that her ears twitched as if suppressing amusement. She was not laughing, yet the effect was worse. Even outside council chambers, the pattern persisted. As he walked the observation decks, she appeared at the far end, casually adjusting gravitic currents to ensure she met him exactly at his pace. "It seems," she said one morning, "that humans are most efficient when they are aware that someone interesting is observing them." Adrian raised an eyebrow. "Or terrified that someone with long ears will notice every inefficiency." Her laughter rippled lightly, vibrating through the deck. "A combination, perhaps: efficiency tempered with mild panic, optimal performance." One evening, an unexpected freighter arrived carrying envoys from a neighboring system, signaling a potential diplomatic rupture. The council scrambled. Adrian was summoned to provide technical guidance on docking and defense grids. Sarilith arrived without escort, ears angled forward, scanning the situation as though she had already calculated all possible outcomes. "Captain," she said, leaning slightly over a console, "do you believe this envoy is sincere, or is it simply performance art in the guise of diplomacy?" Adrian studied the sensor readouts, gravitational flux, and energy emissions. "If it is performance art," he said carefully, "then it is very poorly choreographed and dangerously close to theatrical sabotage." Her ears twitched, a gesture he was now learning to read with precision. "Terran humor," she murmured, amused, "delightfully pragmatic." By the end of the week, the council grudgingly accepted the new reality. Warnings about proximity became murmurs about agency. Adrian had not moved beyond his post, but Sarilith had, quietly, deliberately, and without apology. The threat he had feared had shifted from him to anyone who underestimated her will. In a rare moment of levity, Adrian found her in the mess hall, attempting to calibrate a replicator for a joke, producing coffee that tasted like molten starlight and miniature pastries shaped like orbiting satellites. "Is this safe to drink?" he asked. "Only if you wish to question your existence for precisely 30 seconds, she replied, ears quivering in amusement. "It pairs well with tactical discussions or existential crises." He laughed, nearly spilling the starlight coffee. For the first time, he realized the absurdity of all the warnings. Proximity, protocol, survival. They were irrelevant in comparison to the deliberate choices of someone who refused to be contained. The chapter ended with both of them standing on the observation balcony, watching freighters arc gracefully around the Capitol towers. Adrian's hand hovered near the rail, carefully avoiding any sudden movement. Sarilith leaned slightly closer, ears angled toward the spinning craft. The universe, in all its infinite calculations and bureaucratic convolutions, had produced a single, undeniable equation. Some variables, particularly those with deliberate humor and long, expressive ears, could not be avoided, only observed, and occasionally appreciated. The day began with a message from the outer systems. One of the Concord's long-standing alliances was under threat. The envoys of Zareth Prime claimed instability in succession planning, citing recent events in the capital. Adrian received the report with practiced neutrality, running calculations on fleet readiness, supply chains, and gravitic field alignment. Saralith arrived as if she had anticipated the transmission, slipping past security with her usual ease, ears flicking with measured attention. "Captain Vale," she said, voice low but amused, "do you suppose they believe a human officer has rewritten the future of an entire political system?" Adrian raised an eyebrow. Either that, or they've never met someone with long ears who enjoys sitting near trouble. She chuckled. Perhaps it is both. Terran pragmatism meets Valar elegance, quite the scandal in the making. Council convened. Advisors fretted over optics, security breaches, and potential interstellar embarrassment. Adrian laid out a proposal: joint patrols, resource sharing, synchronized communication protocols. The plan was efficient, careful, and utterly unremarkable. Saralith leaned over, her long ears brushing a console, and reframed the proposal. "Efficiency is good," she said, "but let us present it as an emblem of unity rather than dependence. Let the Zarithians feel the grandeur of choice, not mere compliance." The council blinked, caught between admiration and panic. Adrian allowed himself a subtle grin. "Unity through dramatic flair," he muttered. Saralith's response was a quiet laugh, her eyes glinting with mischief. "Sometimes, Captain, the universe requires a little theater." The negotiation with Zareth Prime proceeded under this new approach. Delegates arrived in orbiting transports, greeted by a capital humming with gravitic activity and artificial light that refracted like liquid prisms. Adrian presented data confidently, Saralith emphasized symbolism, and together they navigated the tension with a combination of precision and humor. When an envoy questioned Terran engineering reliability, Adrian quipped, "Our ships have been known to survive both bureaucrats and black holes." Saralith laughed softly, ears twitching, and the room relaxed in ways no diplomatic memo could mandate. Later, in the quieter corridors of the capital, she pulled him aside. "You see, Captain, every move is observed, analyzed, and predicted, except the ones chosen freely." He studied her. "Even this," he said, gesturing at the empty hallway, "this choice to pull me aside, it's deliberate." "Entirely," she replied. "I wanted your perspective before the council considers the next move. Your insight is unpredictably precise. Terran logic, filtered through discipline, an interesting variable." Adrian smiled faintly. "So, I am the human data point in your grand experiment." "Not an experiment," she corrected. "An observation, one I find worthwhile." The next week, minor crises kept arriving like meteor showers. A freighter misaligned its docking trajectory, a relay station failed in a mid-orbit maneuver, and an interstellar relay message scrambled in translation. Each time, Adrian proposed practical solutions. Each time, Saralith presented them publicly as demonstrations of coordination, skill, and subtle humor. One particularly tense moment involved a docking bay flooding with minor gravitic anomalies. Adrian recommended a standard recalibration. Saralith suggested doing so while projecting a hollow message of the Terran officer heroically balancing the galaxy. The council stifled laughter, and even the freighters obeyed the corrected orbit as if amused. They began sharing humor quietly, a shield against endless protocol. During a replicated meal, she remarked that Terran cuisine was astonishingly resilient to overcooked protein. Adrian replied that Aurelian pastries, though elegant, were a hazard to human dental integrity. Her ears twitched at the remark, and she laughed, a sound that made the gravitic regulators feel almost playful. Political tension and humor intertwined seamlessly. Saarlith orchestrated alliances not by coercion but by choice, using Adrian's perspective as a measured lens. He contributed without stepping beyond bounds, providing insight she amplified strategically. In private moments, she would point out absurdities in council procedure. A holographic display misaligned, an advisor who tried to recalibrate the rotational axis of the room to suit seating arrangements. Adrian laughed quietly. She tilted her head in acknowledgement. The council attempted subtle warnings. Notes appeared in data slates. Remember your position. Speak only when appropriate. Adrian read them with a smirk, setting them aside as if they were ceremonial confetti. Saarlith, meanwhile, incorporated his observations, her long ears flicking toward him when a solution was particularly effective. The whispers in the corridors shifted focus. Proximity was no longer the concern, it was her deliberate choice, and the quiet authority it represented. One evening, as they observed the capital's orbiting freighters, Adrian remarked on the elegance of their alignment. "It's almost poetic," he said, tone half teasing. "Poetry and precision often coexist," she replied, "much like Terran officers and Valar princesses when they choose to collaborate." Her ears twitched, a signal he had learned to read with subtle amusement. By the end of the chapter, it was clear that the political landscape had shifted. Threats were addressed not by force or fear, but by the careful, deliberate choices of one who refused to be bound by expectations. Adrian remained disciplined, silent, observant. Saarlith remained deliberate, unyielding, and quietly mischievous. Together, they had created a pattern of influence that was subtle, efficient, and infused with humor, enough to remind the universe that agency, when exercised openly, was the most powerful weapon of all. The grand convocation opened with the usual pageantry. Gravitic banners swirled overhead, emissaries floated along orbital platforms in ceremonial harnesses, and the hum of anti-gravity fields filled the chamber like a soft orchestra. Captain Adrian Vale remained in his assigned seat, data slate open, posture rigid, calculating every movement and every potential variable. The warning he had received weeks ago, "Stay away from her," was now irrelevant. The universe had already adjusted to a new equation. Princess Saarlith Valar entered, long ears swaying slightly as if the air itself recognized her authority. The assembly hushed. She moved with measured steps and took her place at the podium, casting a glance toward Adrian that was neither command nor invitation, simply acknowledgement. "Representatives of the conquered," she began, voice calm and deliberate, "we are here not only to reaffirm alliances, but to demonstrate the strength derived from choice, collaboration, and the courage to defy expectation where it matters most." Adrian observed silently. He had learned something subtle in the weeks spent near her. Power was not always loud, and influence did not always require action beyond the measured. He had come to understand that his discipline, his patience, and his willingness to follow protocol had a place in her design, just as her deliberate proximity had a place in his world. During the proceedings, a dispute arose between two planetary delegates over mining rights on a resource-rich asteroid. The counselors argued with intensity, voices rising in their translated tones. Adrian provided precise calculations on projected output, orbital trajectories, and energy consumption. Saarlith reframed his analysis publicly, emphasizing cooperation and mutual gain. One delegate muttered that it was almost theatrical. Adrian smirked quietly. Saarlith's ears twitched in amusement. Later, a minor communication glitch in the interstellar relay threatened to scramble the text of the accords. Adrian recommended a standard recalibration. Saarlith, speaking over the projected feed, framed it as a demonstration of the capital's technological adaptability. The relay corrected itself as if obedient to their combined will. In private, she leaned toward him, ears brushing lightly against his shoulder as he reviewed logistics reports. "Do you see, Captain Vale? You contribute without needing to dominate, and yet your presence alters outcomes in ways the Council cannot predict." He nodded. I suppose the lesson is that some influence requires no overt action at all. Precisely, she replied. And some choices are stronger simply because they are offered freely, not imposed. The convocation concluded with the formal signing of treaties. As Sarilith pronounced each alliance ratified, she gestured subtly toward Adrian when mentioning the Terran contribution. He did not step forward, did not claim credit, and yet his influence was undeniable. The council had stopped whispering warnings. The human officer had become part of the pattern, a necessary constant rather than a disruptive anomaly. Later, in the observation balcony above the Capitol towers, Adrian allowed himself a moment of reflection. The city floated in gravitic suspension, lights glimmering like captured stars. He realized that he had changed, not through rebellion, not through audacious action, but through careful observation, restraint, and the ability to trust that another's deliberate choice could redefine his own place in the galaxy. Sarilith approached, ears angled with a faint amusement. You've adapted remarkably, she said. For someone trained to avoid proximity, you have become reliable, predictable in all the right ways, and occasionally entertaining. Adrian raised an eyebrow. Occasionally. Enough to keep me amused, she replied, tilting her head slightly. The weeks of subtle collaboration, humor threaded through protocol, and careful adherence to boundaries had led to more than stable alliances. They had established a rhythm, a mutual understanding. Adrian no longer feared proximity. He understood that influence did not require aggression, and that choices, even small ones, could shape the trajectory of entire star systems. As the convocation ended, the freighters resumed their intricate dance, orbiting the Capitol towers with precision and grace. Adrian and Sarilith watched in quiet silence. She extended a hand, a gesture neither formal nor intimate, simply deliberate. He took it briefly, not out of necessity but because it was chosen, acknowledged, and unforced. The warnings that had once defined his transfer no longer mattered. She had closed the distance, reshaped expectations, and demonstrated that agency, exercised openly and with humor, was the most potent force of all. Adrian Vale, once cautious and calculated, had learned to exist within that force. Not to resist it, not to flee, but to observe, contribute, and occasionally laugh along the way. The Capitol continued to hum, gravitic fields singing, freighters glinting like satellites of light, but for Adrian, for Sarilith, and for the systems they influenced, the outcome was clear. Distance could be crossed, expectations could be upended, and the quiet power of deliberate choice was enough to alter the course of a galaxy. And in that shared understanding, all loose ends tied themselves into a pattern of resolution, subtle humor, and enduring impact. The human officer had grown, the princess had triumphed, and the universe, as always, continued to spin, but now, slightly differently, measured not by fear or caution, but by the deliberate, joyful exercise of choice.